Meghan Markle has come under fire for attending the Balenciaga fashion show after the brand sustained.
A missing designer handbag just ignited one of Meghan Markle's biggest crises yet. In February 2026, a custom monogrammed Balenciaga handbag commissioned by Zara Tindall vanished days before a major gala. Then, less than a week later, that same bag was spotted on Meghan Markle's arm in Paris, sparking a quiet but brutal scandal the palace and fashion world had been tracking for years. How did a reserved custom piece end up in someone else's hands? And why did the palace and Balenciaga respond with cold, calculated silence? Join us as we uncover the chain of events that allegedly led to Meghan being quietly blacklisted. The handbag that started everything. Early February 2026, Zara Tindall was preparing for the Women in Economic Leadership Gala, a huge charity event where she's not just attending, but basically co-hosting. This was a big deal for her because over the past couple years, Zara's been carefully building this reputation as a modern royal businesswoman, Olympic champion, mother, entrepreneur married to rugby star Mike Tindall, and someone who's carved out her own identity completely separate from royal drama. She doesn't have a royal title, turned it down actually, but she has something more valuable, which is respect. She's the anti-drama royal. She shows up for work and goes back home with no scandals, leaked stories, or sources close to feeding the tabloids. So for this gala, Zara worked with Balenciaga to create this custom handbag. And she didn't just buy something off the shelf and get her initials slapped on it. This was an intentional collaboration that involved several design meetings, material selection, the whole thing. Limited edition cash crocodile embossed clutch, hand-finished, discreetly monogrammed. The kind of piece that's supposed to represent her fashion evolution and her growing influence in these elite circles. The bag was made and stored at Balenciaga's London showroom under Zara's name with a specific pickup date. Everything was organized and scheduled. Then, days before the gala, Zara's team gets a call. The bag is missing. Balenciaga is horrified, apologizing all over the place. Regrettable logistical error. Internal confusion. We're investigating. All the corporate speak that sounds sincere, but doesn't actually explain anything. Zara, according to people close to her, was pissed, but handled it professionally. She attended the gala with a different accessory, didn't make a public fuss, and everyone moved on. Except the story didn't end there, because a week later, somebody inside Balenciaga's Paris office is scrolling through internal photo reports from recent brand events and meetings, and they see something that makes them do a double take. There's Meghan Markle, dressed entirely in Balenciaga, walking into a fashion PR firm's office on the left bank in Paris, and on her arm, Zara's handbag, the exact same one with Zara's monogrammed initials. The photo started circulating internally at Balenciaga, and people were confused at first. Then confusion turns to concern. Meghan wasn't supposed to have that bag. She wasn't a confirmed brand ambassador. Her name wasn't on any official partnership lists. She'd attended Paris Fashion Week, sure, but so did thousands of people. Showing up to shows doesn't make you a brand partner. So now Balenciaga's got a situation. They've got a missing custom piece that belongs to Zara Tindall, actual working royal, respected public figure, someone they've had a legitimate business relationship with, and that piece is somehow in the possession of Meghan Markle, who's been pushing hard for an ambassadorship deal but doesn't actually have one yet. The response from the fashion house was as swift as it was quiet. Contract negotiations with Meghan, which had been progressing slowly, were immediately put on ice. The corporate equivalent of, "We need to figure some things out before we continue this conversation." And in the fashion world, when a major house freezes talks with you, word spreads very fast. So how did Meghan even get the bag in the first place? And what did Zara do when she found out? The investigation nobody talked about. Here's where things got really interesting because the way this played out tells you everything about the different approaches these two women take to problems. When Zara Tindall found out her custom handbag is on Meghan's arm in Paris, she didn't tweet about it, leak it to the press, or call her cousins William and Kate to complain. She does something way more effective. She goes through proper channels with a paper trail. Zara's private secretary contacted Balenciaga directly with a formal but respectful inquiry. Essentially, "Hey, we reserved this specific item. It went missing from your showroom. It's now appeared publicly in someone else's possession. We'd like to understand how that happened." And Balenciaga, realizing they've got a major problem on their hands, starts digging. Because here's the thing, high-end fashion houses keep meticulous records of everything. Every piece that gets made, who it's assigned to, who picks it up, who signs for it, all of it is documented. So when Zara's team asks how a reserved item ended up somewhere it shouldn't be, Balenciaga can't just shrug and say, "Mistakes happen." They have to actually trace the chain of custody. What they found, according to sources inside the company who later leaked bits of information, was that the bag had been checked out from the London showroom by someone claiming to be associated with potential brand partnerships. The pickup was done during a busy period. The person had industry credentials that checked out on the surface, and in the chaos of Paris Fashion Week prep, nobody questioned it thoroughly enough. But here's the kicker. When Balenciaga's legal team started pulling together a timeline of Meghan's interactions with the brand, they found a pattern that made them uncomfortable. Items from photo shoots that were supposed to be returned but weren't. Pieces that were borrowed for personal appearances without prior approval. Requests for products that came through unofficial channels. Nothing illegal technically, but definitely not how legitimate brand partnerships are supposed to work. There was also the issue of Meghan's Paris appearance itself. She'd been posting content suggesting she was there as an official guest of Balenciaga, invited personally by creative director Demna Gvasalia. But when the brand's internal PR team checked their records, Meghan's name didn't appear on any approved guest lists. She wasn't registered as a VIP attendee or confirmed for any official brand events. She'd essentially shown up, worn their clothes, carried their bags, including Zara's custom piece, and created the impression of an official relationship that didn't actually exist. Fashion houses hate this because their whole business model depends on controlling their image and carefully selecting who represents them. When someone shows up acting like an ambassador without permission, it creates confusion in the market and devalues the relationships the brand has actually built with legitimate partners. So Balenciaga did what any smart company would do. They quietly paused everything with Meghan and started distancing themselves. Meanwhile, Zara, she said nothing. Publicly, she was completely silent about the entire thing. And that silence was the most devastating response she could have given, because it showed she wasn't bothered enough to even acknowledge what happened. But Meghan didn't take the hint. Instead, she did what she always does. She tried to control the narrative, and it backfired spectacularly. The flex that failed. So Balenciaga had frozen contract talks, and the handbag story is circulating quietly in fashion industry circles. The more logical thing to do would have been maybe step back, issue a quiet apology through lawyers, and try to rebuild trust privately. But Meghan Markle didn't do any of that. Within 24 hours of the internal Balenciaga freeze, Meghan's team rolled out a glossy video teaser for some new initiative called Love with Meghan. And look, the production value was good, well-polished and expensive-looking. Mood boards, aesthetic shots of her in Paris, close-ups of various accessories including, yes, the handbag, the one with Zara's initials on it that Meghan apparently still had in her possession. Palace insiders described the video as a deliberate provocation because the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Zara gets a major platform at a royal event. Meghan drops content showing she's still got pull in the fashion world. Zara's handbag goes missing. Meghan's suddenly featuring luxury accessories in her promotional material. Her actions were what one fashion publicist called a flex, an attempt to show she could still command attention in elite circles. But here's what Meghan didn't account for. The fashion industry talks. These people all know each other. Executives at different houses, PR firms, creative directors, they're constantly in communication. And when word spread about what happened with the Balenciaga situation, Meghan's reputation took a serious hit. The video that was supposed to be this big relaunch moment got torn apart in industry group chats. People were forwarding it to each other with messages like, "Is she serious right now?" And "The audacity is almost impressive." Because everyone could see what she was doing, trying to act like she was this big fashion influencer, while the actual fashion houses she was trying to court were actively distancing themselves from her. It gets worse. Apparently, Meghan's team had reached out to Balenciaga's creative director, claiming she'd been personally invited to Paris Fashion Week. But when journalists followed up with the brand for confirmation, the response was ice cold. Ms. Markle attended Paris Fashion Week. Many people attend Paris Fashion Week. That's it. No confirmation of an invitation or mention of any relationship. Just a statement so neutral it basically screamed, "We want nothing to do with this." Meghan tried to pivot, started posting on social media about misogynistic narratives and institutional sabotage, hinting at some grand conspiracy to freeze her out of elite circles. She never mentioned Balenciaga by name, probably on advice from her lawyers, but the implication was obvious. She was being persecuted for being too successful and threatening to the old guard. The problem? Nobody was buying it anymore. This was the same playbook she'd been using since 2020. And people were exhausted. One royal source, speaking anonymously because they still have to maintain professional relationships, put it perfectly. Victimhood over accountability, every single time. And while Meghan was spinning herself into knots trying to control the narrative, Zara Tindall just kept living her life. Showed up at the Cartier British Polo Awards in a stunning white tailored suit from Victoria Beckham's collection. A subtle nod to solidarity with actual working royals and British designers. The photos went viral not because Zara was trying to make them viral, but because she looked incredible and carried herself with the kind of understated confidence you can't fake. Fashion critics went nuts for it. Modern restraint, aristocratic ease. This is what actual elegance looks like, and the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Meghan frantically posting videos and dropping hints about conspiracies, while Zara shows up at one event in a great outfit and reminds everyone why she's respected in these circles. One Vogue UK editor mentioned that Zara doesn't chase the spotlight, but when Meghan tried to manipulate the fashion world into a loyalty contest, Zara just stood still, and the world moved toward her. And speaking of the world moving, Princess Anne had been watching all of this unfold, and she was about to make some moves of her own. Princess Anne draws the line. In early 2026, after watching the handbag situation and Meghan's increasingly desperate attempts to stay relevant, Anne decided it was time to respond. But here's the thing about Anne, she doesn't fight in tabloids or leak stories to friendly journalists. Instead, she makes use of the institutional machinery she knows inside and out to make her point without ever having to say a word publicly. According to palace staffers who were present for internal meetings, Anne initiated what was described as a family-only review of how royal-adjacent figures were aligning with commercial entities. On paper, it was framed as routine housekeeping, just making sure everyone was following proper protocols for brand partnerships and public appearances. In reality, it was Anne's way of putting every single one of Meghan's commercial moves under a microscope without having to publicly acknowledge her existence. The review looked at how people were using royal connections or implications of royal connections in brand negotiations, how products were being acquired from fashion houses, how social media was being used to create impressions of official relationships that didn't actually exist. One longtime palace advisor described it as vintage Anne. You'll never see her flinch, but you will feel the walls move around you. Anne also quietly reactivated her personal advisory group on public image, something that had been dormant since Queen Elizabeth died. The group's first project? Reviewing how Zara, Lady Louise Windsor, and Sophie, now Duchess of Edinburgh, could be elevated as quiet ambassadors of the crown. In other words, while Meghan was making headlines with scandals, the real royals were being strategically repositioned to represent what the monarchy actually values: service, dignity, consistency. Behind closed doors, Anne was even more direct. According to sources who were present for some of these conversations, she made her feelings crystal clear. The crown does not duel on social media. The crown does not chase press cycles. The crown endures. It was a non-engagement protocol. No official responses to Meghan's provocations or statements defending Zara or explaining the handbag situation. Just silence. Let Meghan's theatrics collapse under their own weight while the working royals continued doing what they've always done. And it worked, because while Meghan was posting videos and dropping hints about unspeakable truths she might reveal, the actual royals were just working. Anne did her engagements. Zara did her charity events. Sophie supported her patronages. Catherine recovered from her health issues and returned to public life with grace and dignity. The contrast was devastating. One camp spinning frantically to control a narrative, the other camp not bothering to engage because engagement would give the narrative legitimacy it didn't deserve. But the fallout for Meghan was only beginning, because once the fashion industry started closing ranks, other dominoes began to fall. The blacklisting begins. When word gets around that someone is difficult to work with or can't be trusted, that information spreads fast. And once you're on the wrong side of that information flow, getting back in is nearly impossible. The Balenciaga freeze was just the beginning. Within weeks, other fashion houses started quietly distancing themselves from Meghan. And we're not talking about formal announcements or press releases. This is how the industry works. Invitations dry up, calls don't get returned, "We'll get back to you," turns into permanent radio silence. Chanel had supposedly been in early talks about some kind of sustainability collaboration with Meghan. Those talks ended with no explanation. Instead, Chanel quietly partnered with Zara Tindall for an equestrian-inspired capsule collection that got a full spread in Vogue. No big announcement, just a gorgeous editorial featuring Zara doing what she actually does, working with horses, while wearing pieces from the collection. Dior and Burberry, both of whom had received aggressive outreach from Meghan's stylists about including her in spring 2026 campaigns, opted to pass. A French PR director who works with one of these houses said something that really captures the industry sentiment. "She doesn't represent discretion, and discretion is our currency." Meanwhile, Zara's calendar was filling up. Co-host of the Royal Charity Polo event, equestrian lead for Commonwealth Youth Games, featured in Harper's Bazaar UK's Legacy and Lineage issue. And here's the thing, she wasn't doing outreach for any of this. She wasn't hiring PR firms to chase opportunities. The opportunities were finding her because she represented something the industry actually values: authenticity. The contrast in how these two women were being treated by the fashion industry became impossible to ignore. Meghan, who had spent years cultivating this image as a fashion icon and style influencer, was getting frozen out. Zara, who had never positioned herself as a fashion person and just wore nice clothes while doing her job, was being courted by every major house. And it wasn't just fashion. Meghan's Archewell Foundation started facing serious scrutiny from the IRS over discrepancies between reported expenses and actual project outcomes. Tyler Perry, who had been letting Meghan and Harry use his properties and had been a major supporter, allegedly stopped offering assistance. Without Harry at her side, who had reportedly returned to the UK for private meetings with Palace legal counsel, Meghan looked increasingly isolated. Her social media presence became more erratic. One day she'd be posting empowerment quotes and mood boards. The next day she'd be hinting darkly about unspeakable truths she might be forced to reveal. The subtext stopped being subtle. Meghan was threatening to leak private communications, to expose conversations, and burn everything down if she didn't get what she wanted. But here's what she didn't understand. The people she was threatening weren't afraid. They dealt with actual crises: death of monarchs, constitutional issues, war, scandal. Meghan's threats to leak text messages or reveal private conversations, that wasn't scary, that was just sad. She's always seen exposure as her sword and shield, a former Sussex aide said. But this time, the room isn't afraid anymore. And while Meghan spiraled, a surprising alliance was forming within the royal family, one that would completely reshape the public narrative. The Quiet Alliance. While all this was playing out, something interesting was happening within the broader royal family. The women who had previously stayed somewhat separate, different generations, roles and priorities, started moving in coordinated ways, through shared understanding of what needed to happen. Lady Louise Windsor, Prince Edward's daughter, and someone who'd always maintained a low profile, was photographed leaving Zara's London flat the morning after the Paris fashion incident exploded online. She was dressed discreetly, but the message was clear to anyone watching closely. Louise, who shares Zara's preference for privacy and service over spectacle, was showing solidarity. Then Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, stepped in. She hosted both Zara and Louise at a private equestrian event in Oxfordshire. No media invited, no social media coverage, totally under the radar. But palace sources confirmed it was about more than just horses. It was about what one press officer described as stabilizing the narrative from within. Sophie had been watching Meghan's behavior carefully for years. She'd seen how Meghan operated during the brief period when they were both working royals, and she'd formed her own opinions. When Meghan's targeting of Zara became public, Sophie apparently decided it was time to show where her loyalties lay. And then there was Catherine. She'd been recovering from serious health issues, deliberately staying out of the spotlight while she healed. Her first major public appearance after her treatment was at a London charity gala on February 12, 2026. And the fashion choice she made? A restructured ivory gown originally worn by Queen Elizabeth II back in 1969. The dress had been in the royal archives for decades. Its reappearance wasn't random. As one royal fashion historian pointed out, it was a signal of continuity, of legacy, of whose side history is on. Catherine and Zara have never been particularly close publicly, different generations and roles, but palace insiders confirm they share a mutual respect built on similar values. Catherine values discretion, and Zara embodies it. When Meghan was posting cryptic messages and threatening to expose private communications, Catherine let a vintage dress do her talking. Elegance, as one aide noted, has never needed a microphone. The alliance wasn't formal. There were no meetings where they planned strategy or coordinated responses. It was something more subtle, a shared understanding that Meghan's tactics required a unified response of dignified silence. Don't engage, defend, or even explain. Just continue doing the work with the same professionalism you've always shown. And it worked, because while Meghan kept trying to drag them into a public fight, they refused to show up. It's impossible to have a battle if only one person is fighting. By mid-February, the shift in public perception was undeniable, and Meghan was about to make it so much worse for herself. Meghan's final gambit. Here's where Meghan's judgment really failed her. Sensing that she was losing ground and that the royal family wasn't taking her bait, she decided to escalate, and not in a smart way. In early March 2026, a sealed letter was hand-delivered to a London legal firm that represented one of the palace's charitable partners. The message was carefully worded, but the intent was unmistakable. If defamatory inferences toward the Duchess of Sussex continued, even through non-verbal optics, whatever that means, she would consider releasing archived digital communications between herself and unnamed senior royals. The reaction from palace officials? Complete indifference. Anne's recommendation was simple: ignore it. So they did. What Meghan also didn't anticipate was how her threat would play in the court of public opinion. People who might have been sympathetic to her grievances started questioning whether someone who threatens to leak private communications can really claim the moral high ground. Even some of her supporters started getting uncomfortable with the tactics, and while she was making threats, Zara was being offered a limited edition co-hosting role at Royal Ascot's Style Pavilion, a position that had actually been hinted at for Meghan back in 2020 before everything fell apart. The irony was painful. The role Meghan had wanted and lost through her own behavior was now being given to the woman she'd tried to undermine. When a journalist at a Glasgow horse trial asked Zara if she'd seen Meghan's latest Instagram post, one where Meghan wore a replica of one of Zara's Ascot looks with the caption, "Real class needs no bloodline," Zara's response was perfect. She blinked once, paused, then said, "Some of us ride horses. Some of us ride headlines. I prefer the former." Then she literally walked away and got back to work. That quote was picked up by over 300 outlets within 24 hours. It was calm, it was cutting, it was devastating, and it was exactly the kind of response that cuts through because it doesn't try too hard. Even Princess Anne reportedly raised an eyebrow in approval when she heard about it. Coming from Anne, that's basically a standing ovation. And as Meghan's situation continued to deteriorate, one final confrontation was coming. This time in the form of a letter that nobody expected. The letter nobody saw coming. Something remarkable recently happened that shocked everyone. Princess Anne wrote to Meghan Markle, a personal letter, couriered to Montecito through diplomatic channels. The contents were never publicly released, but trusted palace sources confirmed the tone. It was composed, direct, and deeply moral. Not an attack or an olive branch, something else entirely. Anne's message, according to those who were briefed on it, essentially said this: royalty isn't something you inherit through blood alone. It's earned in the spaces between headlines, in how you endure, not just how you speak. The letter reportedly invited Meghan to return to a path of public duty, not as a duchess playing at celebrity, but as a woman capable of choosing legacy over leverage. But Meghan never responded. Within days, the Archewell Foundation's troubles deepened. The IRS investigation intensified. Grant distribution models were being questioned. Former employees were being subpoenaed. And critically, this wasn't British tabloids or royal sources making trouble. This was American federal authorities following a paper trail. Back in London, preparations for protection continued. Prince William reportedly ordered communications offices to update all Sussex-era protocols, flagging potential reputational risks. Catherine advised her patrons to transition away from any collaborations with Archewell-linked organizations, quietly untangling themselves from anything that might become problematic later. When asked by an aide whether she wanted to address the Markle situation directly, Zara's response was pure Windsor. If you know what you're doing, you don't have to explain what you didn't do. What do you think? Did Meghan actually steal that handbag, or was this a setup? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.